If you ask someone what they think is the most negative thing about Auckland, New Zealand, you are likely to receive one of two answers: the sky-high cost of living and the endless amount of traffic. Every weekday, 2 times a day, the majority of Aucklanders are consigned to the slow crawl into work, school, home, and other places like shops, parks, and restaurants. So how did Auckland's traffic come to the gigantic standstill it is today? What are the negative effects of traffic for Auckland, and what are the solutions to this problem? To find out the answers to all of these questions, we first need to wind back the clock to the 1920s, where the layout of Auckland was completely different. Before I continue, if you find urban planning topics interesting and you want to be notified for future videos, hit the subscribe button down below. During the first half of the 20th century, Auckland had an extensive tram network, which covered most of the Auckland built-up area at the time. As trams were readily available to most Aucklanders, patronage was high, with a peak of just under 120 million trips annually, or 420 trips per capita during the Second World War, which is an astonishing figure for public transport use in New Zealand compared to today, but we'll get back to that in a bit. Following the end of World War II in 1945, the car became cheaper and more accessible to the average person. As a result, Auckland, along with many other cities in the world, began replacing their trams with cars during this period, with the last of Auckland's tram network closing in 1956. This transformation saw many of the roads that tram lines ran along, like Dominion Road, turned into roads focused on car movement, as well as the Auckland Harbour Bridge, which opened in 1959, just 3 years after the close of the tram network, being exclusively used for vehicles, an issue that is still prevalent today. As a result of car-centric policies, public transport uses in Auckland plummeted and became a shell of what it once was in the space of a few decades. By the 1990s, public transport trips in Auckland had reached a low, with the city seeing 33 trips per capita in 1998, a figure that was significantly lower than the comparable cities in Australia and Canada, and paling in comparison to the figures seen during the Second World War. Over the second half of the 20th century, Auckland went from having a high usage tram network to one of the most car-dependent cities in the developed world, with the city being described as one of the most car-biased cities in the world by the late Paul Mees, an expert in urban planning and transport. The actions that were undertaken during this period left the city with big consequences that are being felt today. Combined with a growing population and extensive urban sprawl, car dependency has resulted in traffic becoming one of Auckland's biggest issues in the 21st century. But how bad is it really? According to TomTom, a company that tracks traffic data from cities around the world, Auckland has lost an average of 81 hours to traffic in 2023, which was slightly lower than the Australian cities of Melbourne and Sydney, is 12 hours more than Christchurch, New Zealand's second largest city. The amount of time that Aucklanders lose to traffic equates to over 3 days lost, which results in lower productivity, more social isolation, and is also costly to the economy. In 2017, it was reported that traffic congestion costs the city $1.3 billion yearly, equating to $3.5 million daily, which is a significant amount of money lost, as you can imagine. Traffic on the road is the result of more cars on the road. More cars on the road lead to more people driving. More people driving naturally increases the risk of a car crash occurring, which itself causes longer delays. It's a vicious cycle. If you check a New Zealand news website on any weekday, you'll often come across a report of a crash on Auckland's motorways. And of course, there's significant environmental impacts resulting from traffic. As you probably know already, cars produce significantly more carbon emissions and pollution than buses, trains, and ferries. In 2016, transport emissions contributed to 44% of Auckland's carbon emissions, which is more than any other sector. Of the total emissions, 30% of them came from just cars. Buses and trains, meanwhile, equated to less than 1% of total emissions. Then there are smaller impacts of traffic, like buses being caught up in congestion if there's little to no bus priority, unreliable travel times, and noise pollution. Overall, traffic has many social, economical, and environmental implications for Auckland, and is a contentious issue for New Zealand due to Auckland being the biggest economic hub for the country. Of course, something needs to be done to reduce traffic in Auckland, but the solutions aren't as straightforward as you might think. If you're one of the many Aucklanders who's currently stuck in the slow crawl to work twice a day, the solution to you might seem obvious: build more roads. With a bigger and better road, everyone will be able to move freely around the city, and the existing traffic problem will become a thing of the past. Sounds great, doesn't it? Well, not quite. When new roads are built, people are incentivized to use it, as they see that there's more road capacity, and therefore driving becomes more convenient. This concept is known as induced demand. For those who aren't familiar with the concept, people who might take alternative modes of transport, like public transport or walking, or those who wouldn't make the trip due to the traffic, would switch to driving because of the increased road capacity. This is also known as build it and they will come. New roads are often built with the primary aim to reduce congestion. While this may happen initially, over the long term, more people begin to take the road as they see that the road is the fastest way to their destination. When enough people use the road, we eventually see travel times increase a few years after the road opens. This is induced demand taking effect. There are many examples of induced demand occurring around the world. One example can be seen across the Tasman Sea in Sydney, Australia. In late 2023, following the opening of the $20 billion Roselle interchange, there were immediate traffic issues on Sydney's roads, with travel times tripling in some cases. If you're interested in learning more about the traffic chaos following the Roselle interchange opening, Birding Beautifully has made a great video about it, which I'll leave the link to in the description. And yes, in case you were wondering, induced demand does apply to Auckland as well. In 2017, the Waterview Tunnel connecting the Western Motorway to the Southwestern Motorway opened in the suburb of Point Chevalier, but 4 years later, congestion was reported to be at an all-time high, with every motorway in Auckland seeing an increase in travel times between 2019 and 2021. These examples might indicate that induced demand is bad for transportation as a whole, but examples I've included have only talked about roads. Induced demand exists in other modes of transportation, including public transport, walking, and cycling. As I mentioned earlier, if you build more transport infrastructure, people will use it. When the Northern Busway opened in 2008, it was known as an instant success, with ridership numbers of 1.3 million that year. By 2019, ridership numbers had increased to 8 million, increasing at an average rate of 25% every year. If you're wondering why more road capacity doesn't decrease traffic, while public transport projects do, the efficiency of transport modes and how available they are play a big factor. This is a chart from the Transformative Urban Mobility Initiative, showing the capacity of different transport modes, and as you can see, cars have a passenger capacity of 1,500 to 2,000 per hour on a lane that's 3.5 meters wide, while public transport modes such as heavy rail and bus rapid transit, as well as walking and cycling, have significantly higher capacities per hour. This is why a well-connected public transport system improves the efficiency of a traffic network and results in improved services and faster travel times in the long term. Compare this to roads, where at best, travel times are slightly faster in the short term, and at worst, once everyone gets used to the new infrastructure and plans their commute around the increased capacity of the roads, get longer and more unreliable than what it was previously. Traffic is a complex issue, and there isn't an immediate solution to it. You may think that traffic congestion is just going to happen in any city, and that the problem gets worse the more populated a city is, but this is not necessarily true. Tokyo, Japan, the most populated city in the world, is well known for having an extensive metro network that makes everyday travel easy and convenient without the use of a car. New York and London, like Tokyo, also have excellent metro networks, which are widely used by both tourists and residents. In fact, only 45.6% of New York households own a car, which is the lowest percentage of car ownership in any American city. If you want to know why these three cities are often ranked as the world's best and most visited cities, the extensive public transport networks are a big factor. Walking and cycling are other forms of transportation a city can use. As I mentioned earlier, walking and cycling move more people around per hour than roads. This is just one benefit of walking and cycling. A 2017 study from the British Medical Journal showed that those who walked or cycled to work had a lower chance of developing cancer or other diseases. According to the New Zealand 2018 census, 5.3% of the working Auckland population primarily walked or biked to work, which is below the national average of 7.2%. Coming back to the point about more populated cities and traffic, the reason Tokyo isn't as congested compared with other cities is because of its frequent and well-connected metro network. By contrast, the newest city of Atlanta, the sixth most populated city in the United States, with a metro population of just over 6 million, is well known for having some of the worst traffic in the US. By comparing the metro networks of Tokyo and Atlanta, you can see that most of Tokyo is covered by its metro, while the same can't be said for Atlanta. Which leads me to Auckland, which, like Atlanta, has multiple areas of the city poorly connected to its train network, particularly in the east of the city, in addition to areas of the city having poor access to bike infrastructure, making many areas of the city car dependent. There are, however, multiple public transport projects coming to Auckland. The City Rail Link, an underground rail link located in the Auckland CBD, and multiple busways, like the Eastern Busway and Northwestern Busway, are planned for completion in the coming years, which will increase the capacity of public transport and make services more reliable around the city for the growing number of users, with 100 million trips being taken on public transport in 2019, a figure 3 times that of the mid-1990s. The 1950s was a significant period in city planning as cars became the dominant form of transport in many cities, while on the contrary, public transport was neglected and saw patronage begin to gradually decline over the coming decades. Looking back at the era, it's been proven through many examples in both New Zealand and around the world that more roads do not fix traffic, and can even worsen it in some cases. Meanwhile, providing alternatives to road, like public transport, is a way to avoid worsening the problem, which at the same time reduces the negative social, economical and environmental impacts that come with traffic. I want to end on a positive note though. Despite the current challenges Auckland faces with traffic, public transport has seen significant improvements since the depths of the 1990s, both in patronage and in infrastructure. There's still a long way to go obviously, but I'm hopeful that Auckland can become a thriving public transport hub. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. If you want to see your thoughts about Auckland's traffic problem or have an idea for a future video, feel free to comment down below. And as always, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.